Hello, I'm Dory Boone, and I'll be presenting my personality type presentation for MGMT 571 for Dr. Caesar's Sediliosis class. So just a quick overview. The presentation will first cover the Myers-Briggs type indicator and like the significance of it and what it is. And then I'll be moving on from there and I will discuss my own personality type that I received once I finished taking the assessment. And then lastly, I'll go over some key takeaways. So what is the Myers-Briggs type indicator? In order to figure out my personality type, I took a 70-question survey known as the Myers-Briggs type indicator assessment, or MBTI for short. So what is it exactly? It's an assessment tool. It serves as a self-reported psychological test used to kind of highlight the personality traits and ultimately determine a person's personality type and strengths and social interaction preferences. And there are 4 categories, and they're like of opposing qualities. So they're basically like dichotomies, extremes of each other. And so the 4 categories are extroversion, introversion, sensing to intuition, thinking to feeling, and then judgment to perception. And the combination of these different opposing qualities allows for 16 different personality possibilities. The assessment itself was created by the daughter and mother duo of Isabella Briggs Myers and Catherine Briggs. The duo kind of drew their inspiration from Carl Jung's theory of personality, which was published in 1921. And Carl Jung was just a Swiss psychiatrist who took a unique approach to explaining the human psyche and just how it kind of worked. And the way he explained it, nobody had kind of done before. And Briggs and Myers took like the original 3 dichotomies that he introduced in his paper, and they added the judgment and perception kind of opposing qualities to it, and kind of added that category to the mix. They felt that it's as if Jung's paper did hint at like this already being a dichotomy, but they went on and just included it because they felt like he didn't just come out and explicitly state like this was another group of opposing qualities that could play into how people's personalities form and the decision and behaviors they have. So then in 1944, during the Second World War, the Briggs-Myers type indicator handbook was published. And then in 1956, it was republished and rebranded as the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which is what is known for and known as now. So upon completing the questionnaire, I discovered that my personality type was INFJ, which is like the advocate/protector personality type. And this personality type means that I'm more introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. The introverted extroverted scale determines how an individual interacts with their environment. Since I lean toward being more introverted, I am oriented primarily toward the inner world. Therefore, I tend to kind of focus all my energy more on concepts, ideas, and internal experiences than on people and objects present in like my everyday environment in real life. And then if you look at the intuitive observance scale, it kind of focuses on how individuals perceive the information they collect from the world around them. Intuitive individuals tend to rely on meanings and relationships and symbolic interactions and abstract ideas, and not necessarily are their conclusions grounded in like reality or backed by factual evidence. They kind of just identify patterns and possibilities available to them in life. And they are the people that are more like, I go with my gut feeling. If you look at the thinking feeling dichotomy and scale, it's kind of designed to reflect a person's preference when it comes to making judgment calls. Feeling individuals tend to make decisions on the basis of personal, social, and like moral values, instead of basing decisions on ethical values and logical consequences. And then lastly, you have the judging and prospecting like dichotomy. And it's designed to identify the process a person tends to use in dealing with like encounters and interactions in the real world. So more of like those extroverted experiences. Um, so a person with the judging attribute uses either thinking or feeling, and in my case, it would be feeling, um, to guide social interactions instead of using either the sensing or intuition approach when dealing with the outside world. And then I also thought it was just kind of important to note that for one quality over the other, like nobody just uses these four qualities by themselves. Like these are just my dominant ones that'll show up the most often in my life. Um, Everyone uses all eight of them at some point in time in their life. However, the assessment just highlights the qualities you are most likely to use in like the heat of the moment or on a daily basis or just most often in your life. So looking here, here are some of the traits that comes with the INFJ like personality type. So so you got the common traits, which are we're idealistic. We can be intense and tightly wounded. We can be have be highly principled and like have high moral standings. We could be natural born leaders, and we dislike dealing with details unless there is a purpose for it. Um, I personally believe this is spot on for the most part. But over the years, I have learned how not to be so like easily triggered. I have seen in the past where I might have been like intense and kind of like tightly wounded and like certain things that just trigger me. But now I have like a friend who literally maybe like a couple weeks ago was like they always do little things like throw little like small objects at me or like untie my shoes when I'm not looking or like just call me random names and not mean names. They'll be like, "Oh, hey, sir," and I'm like, "Oh, you talking to me or whatever?" And one day I just asked her, I was like, "Why do you always do that?" And she was like, "Because you're always calm. And like I don't ever see you like get upset or anything." And that I kind of realized then like it's been like a switch with that. And then my coaches also just tell me that sometimes I'm like too nice or too like easygoing. Um, and so I feel like maybe I've went from the extreme for this particular characteristic. I went from being kind of like easily triggered to just being like very much going with the flow. So that's the only thing I would say I didn't necessarily agree with when it came to the common traits that are presented in this personality type. But looking at some of the strengths, we are considered warm and affirming, concerned for others' feelings. We're good listeners, we have good communication skills. We have high expectation for ourselves and others. Um, and then looking at the weaknesses, um, is we have a tendency to hold back a part of ourselves. We have an extreme dislike for conflict and criticism. And then we have like difficulties leaving a bad relationship. And we also have high expectations for ourselves and others. So that's also a strength and a weakness because we can sometimes kind of go too far with it and put unrealistic goals on ourselves and people. So some of the strengths I kind of do agree with, or I kind of agree wholeheartedly with most of the strengths. But I also kind of agree with the weaknesses for the most part, except like I don't really mind criticism so much because like I had a coach that was like highly critical of me when in my undergraduate time, and he would always be like, anytime I made a mistake, he would literally yell, "You get an F minus 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 minus," and I used to be like so nervous to get an F minus. I don't even know what that is, but an F minus minus minus. Um, and so now I think I'm just always kind of prepared for whatever it worse, I guess, that can come from it. But it no longer scares me. I almost invite it sometimes because I've noticed that even in the midst of like the worst and even seemingly like unfounded criticism, there's like actually some level of truth to it. And I feel like you can always take it with a grain of salt and kind of just learn from it. And then I can also just see how like I even agree with the weakness that says like we might have difficulties leaving a bad relationship. Not that I necessarily have had the opportunity to do that, but I have seen where like I don't like conflict, so I can see how that's very much possible. And then lastly, I just want to note that while I didn't find anything too surprising in the results, I actually felt they were mostly spot on. But I did find it surprising that only 1% of people have this personality type. Honestly, I don't feel like I'm rare or special in regard to how I live my life in comparison to like my peers or like other people around me. I feel like we kind of that's why we get along because I thought we were so similar. So I just find it really interesting that I ended up in the minority for this instead of like the majority of personality types. So then I have a type, so what? So now that I know what my personality type, like how can I make that applicable in my everyday life? So Myers and Briggs actually designed this assessment during World War II as a way to help kind of guide women entering the workforce and help them identify jobs that would be the most ideal for them based on their personality type. And so I feel like this is still applicable today. The MBTI assessment can help me to better understand how my personality relates to potential career opportunities and options. It can go as far as to help me understand how I can further develop in my field and just have like that a little bit extra of career development aid, and even how best to apply what comes natural to me to my job and career. And I guess just in other words, it could be the key to working smarter and not harder. And then just some potential careers that would be good for my type of personality is like counselors, therapists, teachers, spiritual leaders, which is just targeted at like that helping others aspect that we enjoy. And then also just service industry jobs like healthcare or nonprofits, which is just targeted at building those genuine relationships we like to have with people. And then just some quick like key takeaways is that this assessment is a tool that gives you insight into what like makes you you essentially. And so by taking the insight given, you can kind of develop a, more awareness of the strengths, weaknesses, and differences I have, and also what other people may have. And just knowing how a person is likely to behave or react can help me make, better adaptation for my skills when interacting with them in order to better like frame decisions and reduce miscommunication and understand their personal needs just kind of more effectively. And then like just kind of quickly, like for an example, if I'm using what I have learned about my personality type, I can say kind of which leadership approach I think could be most effective when dealing with certain personality types. So for me, INFJs, the me's of the world would appreciate a more democratic like leadership style, um, where we feel everyone is being heard and fairly getting their opinion like shown and gotten across. While another personality type like ISTP would thrive under a more like laissez-faire a leadership because they are more independent and analytical individuals who don't necessarily like collaboration and teamwork. They prefer to go solo dolo. Um, and so yeah, that was some of the key takeaways I took away, and just learning like strengths and blind spots, and just ultimately it goes past work, even just learning how to better communicate and interact with people in your everyday life based on how they behave and think, based on their personality. So this is my works cited, and like thank you for your time.